Radical Russ sent you. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining. Welcome back, everyone. Half past the hour, time for an expanded edition of Drug War Data Mining, taking a look at the 2014 Monitoring the Future survey results from the University of Michigan. Talked to over 40,000 8th, 10th, and 12th graders during the spring of 2014 as two states were firing up their marijuana legalization initiatives, and the entire national conversation had been dominated by marijuana law reform. These are the views of the kids as surveyed by our federal government. And we have some tables to take a look at here today. And these are all available through monitoringthefuture.org. You'll have to click through a few links to get it, but you will find these data tables. We're starting with table 14, which gives us a look ranging from 1991 to 2014 on the lifetime use of various drugs by all of the students surveyed. So we're not breaking it down by 8th, 10th, and 12th. This was all the kids surveyed. And our top lines give us any illicit drug other than marijuana, any illicit drug including inhalants, marijuana, inhalants, hallucinogens, cocaine, and so forth. And what we find as we look across this, you'll also see that a bold-faced number represents the peak for that number, and an underlined number represents the low. And that's in the range of 1991 to 2014. So keep in mind that our marijuana line is the fourth line. It's the white line up there. And as we go across, we'll see that in 1997, 37.8% of all students from 8th, 10th, and 12th grade, 37.8% had tried marijuana in their lifetime. So it's also, I think, important to note that 1997 was the year medical marijuana began in California. So at the beginning of the medical marijuana era, you could say, we find the greatest amount of marijuana use among the students, 37.8%. Now, as we go through the years and more states get medical marijuana into 2000, into the early 2000s, we see that number declining, and a steady decline down to its low, its all-time low of 27.9%. We hit that in 2007. From 2007 on, we will see that number increase, and I have to re-scroll that because it gets a little funky sometimes. Sorry, folks. Oh, I hate it when it does this. Okay, there we go. All right. So again, fourth line here, we see that number had declined. It's not going to work. I'm so sorry about that. Here we go. Just scroll over to it. And now by 2014, we find ourselves at 30.5%. But that's a decline from 32% the year prior. The numbers have been variable since about 2007. This most recent number declining may not be significant, but it is interesting to note that over the past 2 years, we haven't seen much change in the lifetime use of marijuana among the teenagers, despite the fact that we legalize marijuana now in 4 states. We can also take a look at the annual use in a similar chart that lets us know that, again, the peak was in 1997, where 30% of the kids had mentioned that they had used marijuana in that previous year. Also, we find the lowest number hitting 21.4% in 2007. And once again, it doesn't want to let me show you the current numbers without doing some more solid scrolling. There we go. So 2014, we get down to 24.2%. Again, a decline of about 1.6 points from the previous year. Looking from the beginning of the medical marijuana era, then, the annual use rate among kids has declined almost 20%. The proportional change is almost 20% from 1997 to what we have today. Looking at the kids that use more often, this would be the monthly use lines. They switched up the color codes on us, so the marijuana line is still a fourth line, but it's the blue highlighted line. And again, when we're talking about scrolling around, I better do it in a different way because I don't get the results I want. All right, here we go. So marijuana on our blue line, 17.9% for 1997. Again, the modern peak when medical marijuana began. 2007, 12.4%, the modern low, and currently sitting at 14.4%. Meaning, since the beginning of the medical marijuana era, another 19.6% decline in the youth use of marijuana on a monthly basis. And now we have a chart of even the daily usage rates. And with daily usage rates, marijuana takes up our top line. Once again, not once again, slightly different here. The highest use rate we found for daily marijuana use was 3.7% in 2001. The lowest use rate, again in 2007 at 2.7%. Currently, 3.3% of the 8th, 10th, and 12th graders surveyed are using marijuana on a daily basis. An absolute or a proportional change of about 10% since the beginning of the medical marijuana era. Now, one of the common talking points of the prohibitionists has to do with what they call perception of harm. We heard it from Senator Charles Grassley that somehow the administration allowing marijuana legalization to move forward is going to lead the kids to think that marijuana is no big deal and therefore they will use more of it. But as we've seen, the numbers have declined steadily since the beginning of the medical marijuana era. So as we've had more reforms, as we've had more liberal marijuana laws, fewer kids are using, and they're using less often. So does that mean that their perception of risk has declined or has increased or decreased? Well, the question has been asked since 1991, and this is for the 8th graders. And do they find it harmful if someone tries marijuana once or twice, if someone smokes marijuana occasionally, or if someone smokes marijuana regularly? And again, the peak in most of those numbers, we're going to find, oh, they don't have this one underlined, excuse me. But again, 1997 is about the peak, the beginning of the medical marijuana era. So 25, 43, and 72, as far as kids thinking marijuana was harmful, depending on how often that's used. And this is 8th graders. We are down now to 23, 36, and 58. So 8th graders find it much less harmful if people use marijuana. And you'll see a similar trend if we look at the 10th graders, ranging from about 65%, 66% who thought regular use was harmful, down now to just 45% who think regular use is harmful. And among high school seniors, a similar trend. And this question has been asked for a longer time, since 1975. Those who would think regular use is harmful peaked around 1990, 1991 at 78.6%. Greatest harm. That was the most high school seniors ever thought that regular marijuana use was harmful. If we move forward to the 2014 high school seniors that think marijuana use, regular use, is harmful, is down to 36.1%. So in all grade levels, kids find the regular use of marijuana far less harmful, and yet they're smoking less of it. Completely contrary to what the prohibitionists always tell us, which is that if we legalize, it'll send the message that pot's okay and more kids will smoke it. Well, legalization has apparently sent the message that pot is not to be feared, and fewer kids are smoking it. We also have the trends in disapproval table, which tells us, do you think it's bad? Just do you socially disapprove of that action? Which is a number that hovered in the 90% for regular use among 8th graders, down to 80% among today's 8th graders. For the 10th graders, a similar decline from the 90% disapproval down to a 74.6% disapproval today. And among the high school seniors, from an 80% disapproval down to a 73% disapproval today. So more kids disapprove of the use of marijuana, or fewer kids are disapproving of the use of marijuana, and yet fewer kids are using marijuana. So among their peers, there's more acceptance of marijuana use. And among their peers, there's more acceptance of marijuana use. There's less perception that it's harmful to use marijuana, and yet fewer kids are using marijuana. Now, another interesting statistic that we get from the Monitoring the Future study is how available kids think marijuana is. Another argument that we get from prohibitionists is by legalizing marijuana, there's going to be more access for kids. As we look at these 8th grade numbers for marijuana, top line, we find how these are the kids that say it's easy to get marijuana. Easy or fairly easy. A number that topped out around 1996, 54.8% of 8th graders, more than half of 8th graders, said it would be easy to get marijuana. Today, in 2014, we're down to a shade over a third of them. From over half to just over a third, 36.9% of 8th graders say marijuana would be easier to get. Despite the fact that 23 states have legalized medical use in that time, and now 4 states have legalized recreational use, 8th graders are finding it harder to get a hold of marijuana. If we look at the 10th graders, a similar sort of demographic, a number that ranged as high as the 80%, 81% back in 1996, a number that is down to 66.9%, from over 4 out of 5 to just under 2 out of 3 10th graders say it would be easy to get marijuana. It's harder for 10th graders to get marijuana now. And among high school seniors, the oldest demographic who might even have older friends that can help get it for them, we find marijuana easy to get was over 90% in the late 90s, a number that has declined to just over 80% now. Even high school seniors are finding it harder to get a hold of marijuana, despite medical marijuana and recreational marijuana legalization, and the overall discussion for marijuana reform, and all the messages being sent by the federal government not going after the recreational states. Fewer kids use, despite less perception of harm, despite more acceptance, and they're finding it harder to get a hold of marijuana. Legalization works. All right, we're going to take a break. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, that's all available at monitoringthefuture.org. You can find those tables. Tomorrow, we'll take some of this data and show you in the Drug War data mines how to spin it in Excel and make it look pretty. But stay tuned. Coming up next, we got the anti-drug public service announcement of the day, followed by the radical rant on the steady death of marijuana prohibition. Listening to the Russ Belville Show on 420radio.org.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.